The scream tore through the night with such raw agony that even the ancient stone walls of Castel Noctis seemed to shudder, and Valdren Corvo, king of the northern vampire dominion, felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries crack open inside his chest. He was at her side before the echo faded, his white hair streaming behind him as he materialized in the doorway of her chambers. Zara Donovan lay curled on the floor beside her bed, her face ashen and slick with sweat, both hands pressed against her abdomen. Blood seeped between her fingers, dark and human and wrong. Zara. Her name left his lips as both command and prayer. He knelt beside her, his pale hands hovering over her trembling form, and for all his immortal power, for all the armies he commanded and the territories he ruled, he had never felt so utterly helpless. "What happened?" I don't know." Her voice came out thin and broken. "It just started hurting, and then Valdren, something's wrong. Something's really wrong." He could smell it now, beneath the copper tang of blood. Poison. Not any poison he recognized from the vampire courts, but something chemical, something modern and human, and designed to kill slowly from the inside. His vision sharpened to predatory focus as rage and fear warred inside him. Someone had poisoned her. Someone had dared to touch what was his, but that was a problem for later. Right now, she was dying. "I'm taking you to a hospital." He gathered her into his arms with infinite care, cradling her against his chest. She was so small, so fragile, so devastatingly mortal. "Valdren, no." Even in her pain, Zara tried to protest. "The sun will be up in 2 hours. You can't." "I can and I will." His voice left no room for argument. "You think I would let you die to spare myself discomfort?" "Not discomfort," she gasped as another wave of pain racked through her. "Death. Sunlight kills you." "Then I will be very fast." He moved through the castle at inhuman speed, his footsteps silent on ancient stone floors, his mind already calculating routes and timing and exactly how many laws he was about to break. Castel Noctis sat beneath the modern city of Ashwick, hidden in a network of caverns and tunnels that predated human civilization in this region. Above them, the mortal world continued in ignorance of the vampire realm that existed in the shadows. Zara whimpered against his chest, and the sound sliced through him like silver through flesh. "Stay with me," he commanded. "That is an order from your king." "Not my king," she managed, and despite everything, despite the poison eating through her veins and the terror clawing at his ancient heart, he felt his lips curve slightly. Even now she defied him. Even now she refused to bow. It was why he loved her. He hadn't meant to fall in love with a human. For 347 years he had ruled the Northern Dominion with cold efficiency, taking blood when needed, taking lovers when desired, but never allowing his heart to become entangled. Hearts were weaknesses. Hearts got you killed. He had learned that lesson when he was still mortal, when he still had warm skin and a beating pulse, and a family that the plague took one by one until he was the only one left to bury them. Then Zara Donovan had walked into his life 6 months ago, and everything he thought he knew about himself had been proven catastrophically wrong. She had come to Ashwick as a journalist, investigating rumors of unusual activity in the old district. She was brave and brilliant and absolutely infuriating, with dark curls that fell past her shoulders and eyes the color of honey in sunlight. When she stumbled into one of the hidden entrances to the vampire realm, when she saw things mortals were never meant to see, he should have killed her. That was the law. That was tradition. Instead, he had looked into those golden eyes and felt something dormant stir to life inside him. So he had broken another law and let her live. More than that, he had brought her into his world, shown her the truth of vampire society, the politics and power and ancient beauty of it. She had been fascinated and terrified and entirely too curious for her own good. She asked questions that made his advisors bristle and challenged traditions that had stood for millennia. And somehow, impossibly, she had looked at him, at the monster with pale skin and crimson eyes and hands stained with centuries of blood, and she had seen someone worth caring for. They had danced around their feelings for months, both too stubborn to admit the truth. He was a vampire king. She was a human journalist. It was impossible. It was forbidden. It was the worst decision either of them could make. He had kissed her anyway, 2 weeks ago, in the library at midnight, with moonlight streaming through stained glass windows. She had kissed him back, threading her fingers through his white hair, pulling him closer despite every logical reason to run. And for the first time in 3 centuries, Valdren had felt truly alive. Now she was dying in his arms, and no amount of immortal power could save her. He burst through the final doors and into the garage, where his cars sat in pristine rows. He chose the fastest one, a black sports car that could move like lightning, and settled Zara carefully into the passenger seat. Her skin was getting colder. Her heartbeat was becoming erratic. There wasn't time for seatbelts or safety. There was only the desperate race against her mortality. The car roared to life, and Valdren pushed it to impossible speeds through the underground tunnels that led to the surface. Zara's breathing came in shallow gasps beside him. He kept one hand on the wheel, and one hand clasped around hers, as if he could anchor her to life through sheer force of will. "Tell me about the hospital," she whispered. "You've never been to one." "I will learn tonight." His voice was grim. "Valdren, save your strength. I need to tell you something, in case you are not dying." The words came out as a snarl. "I forbid it." Despite her pain, she managed a weak laugh. "Still trying to give me orders? Someone must. You certainly don't listen to reason." They emerged from the tunnels and onto the streets of Ashwick, and Valdren pushed the car even faster. The city was quiet at this hour, caught in that strange space between night and dawn. Empty streets stretched before them, streetlights casting pools of yellow light. Then he saw them. The military barricade stretched across the main road like a steel wall. Armed soldiers stood in formation, weapons ready, faces hard. Behind them, armored vehicles formed a second line of defense. Lights blazed in his eyes, blinding and harsh. Valdren's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He had heard rumors of increased military presence in Ashwick, whispers of a task force dedicated to investigating supernatural threats. He had not taken the rumors seriously enough. The human government was not supposed to know about vampires. They were myths and stories, safely relegated to fiction. Apparently, someone had talked. "Sir, this is a restricted area." The voice came through a loudspeaker, amplified and authoritative. "Stop your vehicle immediately." Valdren looked at the barricade, at the soldiers with their weapons trained on his car, at the very deliberate show of force designed to stop anything that tried to pass. He looked at Zara, her face paper white, her breathing growing shallower with each passing second. There was no choice at all. "Hold on," he told her. He slammed his foot down on the accelerator. The car shot forward like a bullet, engine screaming. The soldiers shouted, the loudspeaker blared warnings, and then came the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Bullets pinged off the reinforced exterior of the car, vampire engineering, designed to withstand attacks as Valdren wove between barriers with impossible precision. His reflexes were faster than human, his vision sharper, his entire being focused on the singular goal of getting through. A soldier dove out of the way. Valdren clipped the edge of an armored vehicle, metal shrieking against metal, and then they were through, leaving the barricade in chaos behind them. He expected pursuit, expected sirens and helicopters, and the full force of human military might chasing them down the highway. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, the barricade remained stationary. No one followed. Confusion flickered through him, but there was no time to analyze it. The hospital was 3 miles away. Zara's pulse was becoming threadbare. "Stay with me," he commanded again, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. "Zara, please." "I'm trying." Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. "Why didn't they chase us?" "I don't know. I don't care." The hospital appeared ahead, a modern building of glass and steel, lights blazing in every window. Valdren pulled into the emergency entrance with a screech of tires and was out of the car before it fully stopped. He yanked open the passenger door and scooped Zara back into his arms. She was lighter now, as if the poison was consuming her from within, burning away everything that made her solid and real. The automatic doors slid open, and he strode into the emergency room, his appearance causing immediate chaos. It wasn't hard to understand why. He was 6.5 feet of pale, otherworldly fury, with white hair falling past his shoulders and crimson eyes blazing in a face too beautiful to be human. He was dressed in black, as always, clothes that whispered of old money and older power, and he was carrying a woman covered in blood with an expression that promised death to anyone who got in his way. "She's been poisoned," he said, his voice cutting through the sudden shocked silence. "She needs treatment now." A nurse recovered first, her professional training overriding her fear. "Bring her here," she gestured to a gurney. "What kind of poison?" "I don't know. Chemical, human-made." He laid Zara down with excruciating gentleness, his hands reluctant to release her. She started showing symptoms approximately 20 minutes ago. Doctors and nurses swarmed around the gurney, checking vitals, asking questions, moving with practiced efficiency. Someone tried to pull Valdren back, to clear space for them to work, but he didn't budge. He stood like a marble statue, immovable and eternal, his eyes locked on Zara's pale face. "Sir, you need to step back," a doctor said. "No. We can't treat her with you in the way." "I am not in the way. I am exactly where I need to be." His voice dropped to something soft and deadly. "And if she dies, everyone in this room dies with her." The doctor's face went white, but before the situation could escalate, Zara's hand reached out, fingers scrabbling weakly for his. Valdren caught her hand immediately, threading his fingers through hers. "Let them work," she whispered. "Please." For her, he stepped back. Just one step, just enough to give the medical team room to maneuver, but he never released her hand. He stood vigil as they inserted IVs and drew blood samples and shouted medical terminology he didn't understand. All he understood was that she was fading, slipping away despite their efforts, and he was powerless to stop it. The sun would rise in 43 minutes. He could feel it approaching, that familiar warning that prickled along his skin like an itch he couldn't scratch. When dawn came, he would have to retreat to darkness or burn. That was the law of his kind, unchangeable and absolute. He wasn't leaving. "Her blood pressure is dropping," a nurse called out. "Get me the tox screen results now," the doctor barked. Zara's eyes found his through the chaos. "You should go." "Quiet." "Dawn is coming. I can see it in your face." "I said quiet." "Valdren." She squeezed his hand with what little strength remained. "I'll be okay. You need to. If you finish that sentence, I will be very angry with you." He leaned closer, bringing his face level with hers. "I have crossed barricades and broken laws and threatened doctors for you tonight. Do you truly think I will leave now?" "You'll die. Then I die." He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Do you understand, Zara? I would rather burn than spend eternity without you." Tears slipped down her temples. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Yes, well, you make me stupid." He brushed the tears away with his thumb. "You make me reckless and irrational and entirely too human. It's infuriating." "Tox screen is back." The doctor's voice cut through their moment. "It's an organophosphate compound, likely pesticide-based. We need to start atropine immediately." The medical team moved with renewed purpose, administering treatments, adjusting IVs, monitoring every vital sign. Valdren watched them work with the intensity of a predator, cataloging every movement, ready to intervene if they made a single mistake. Minutes crawled past. The sky outside the windows began to lighten, black fading to deep blue. Valdren felt the sun's approach like a physical weight pressing down on him. His skin began to prickle with warning. Soon it would progress to burning, then to smoking, then to flames that would reduce him to ash in seconds. "Her vitals are stabilizing," a nurse said. "Blood pressure coming back up. Respiratory function improving." Valdren allowed himself to breathe an unnecessary habit from his mortal life, but one he'd never quite broken. Zara's color was returning, the deathly pallor fading to something closer to her normal warm brown. Her heartbeat strengthened, settling into a steady rhythm that was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. "She's going to make it," the doctor said, and the relief in his voice was genuine. "We got to her in time." Zara's eyes opened fully, clearer now, focusing on Valdren's face. "Told you I'd be okay. You are the most infuriating woman in existence," but his voice was soft, almost tender. "And I am deeply grateful you're alive to continue infuriating me." The sky outside turned from blue to pink. The first rays of dawn touched the horizon. Valdren. Zara struggled to sit up, panic flooding her features as she noticed the windows, the light, the danger. Go! Now! In a moment. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with the courtly grace of a different era. First, you need to understand something. When I said I love you 2 weeks ago in the library, I meant it. I mean it still. And I will continue to mean it for however long eternity lasts. I love you too, you idiot. She was crying again, harder now. Which is why you need to leave before you burn. There's a supply closet. The nurse who had first helped them spoke up, pointing down the hallway. No windows. It locks from the inside. Valdren glanced at her, surprised by the assistance. She met his eyes without flinching. I don't know what you are, she said quietly, but I know love when I see it. Go. He went. Not because the sun frightened him. He had lived long enough to make peace with his own mortality, but because Zara was safe now, and dying dramatically in a hospital hallway would only upset her. He moved at human speed, conscious of the watching eyes, and found the supply closet the nurse had indicated. It was small and dark and smelled of disinfectant, but it had no windows and a lock that would keep out curious staff. He settled onto the floor, his back against the wall, and closed his eyes as the sun rose over Ashwick. He could feel it out there, blazing and deadly, a force of nature that could end his existence as easily as snuffing out a candle. But Zara was alive. She would heal, and that was worth any risk. He had never expected to sleep in a hospital supply closet. Then again, he had never expected to fall in love with a human journalist either. Life, it seemed, was full of surprises even after 3 centuries. When he woke, night had fallen again. His internal clock told him it was approximately 8 hours past sunset, which meant he had slept through the entire day, unusual for him, but understandable given the stress and exertion of the previous night. He emerged from the supply closet to find the hospital in evening mode, quieter than it had been at dawn, with dimmer lights and fewer staff moving through the corridors. He found Zara's room with ease, following the familiar pull of her presence that he had never quite been able to explain. She was sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks, picking at a tray of unappetizing hospital food. When she saw him in the doorway, her entire face lit up. "You're okay." She set the tray aside. "I was worried the closet wouldn't be enough, that somehow light would get in," and he crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed her, cutting off her worried rambling with his mouth on hers. She made a small sound of surprise that quickly turned to something else, and her hands came up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss was desperate and relieved and full of everything they hadn't said, all the fear and love and need that words couldn't capture. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than necessary, Zara rested her forehead against his. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking along her cheekbones. "How do you feel?" "Like I got poisoned and almost died." She managed a weak smile. "But better. The doctors say I'll make a full recovery. The treatment worked." "Good." He sat on the edge of her bed, keeping one hand in hers. "We need to discuss who poisoned you." Her expression darkened. "I've been thinking about that. It had to be someone in the castle, someone who had access to my chambers, my food." "Yes." Valdren's voice went cold with fury. "And when I find them, they will deeply regret their choices." "Do you think it's related to the Barricade? To the military knowing about vampires?" "Possibly." He had been considering that question all day as he slept fitfully in the supply closet. "There are factions within vampire society who oppose my rule. Some who believe I am too lenient with humans, too willing to coexist peacefully. Others who think humans should be nothing more than cattle." Zara frowned. "And me being with you, a human in the vampire court, that would be seen as a weakness to exploit, a message to send." His jaw tightened. "Yes. So someone poisoned me to hurt you. Or to start a war between humans and vampires. If you had died, if I had lost control at the hospital and killed humans in my grief, it would have given the military justification to move against vampire territories." His eyes met hers. The Barricade was no coincidence. They were watching for supernatural activity, perhaps tipped off that something would happen. "But they didn't chase us after you broke through." "No. That detail still bothered him. They let us go. The door to the hospital room opened, and a man in a military uniform stepped inside. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes, and he carried himself with the authority of someone used to command. Two soldiers flanked him, hands resting on their weapons, but not drawn. Valdren was on his feet instantly, positioning himself between the man and Zara's bed. His eyes bled to full crimson, fangs extending, every instinct screaming danger. "Easy," the man held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to fight. My name is General Marcus Webb. I command the Supernatural Task Force for this region. If you're not here to fight, then leave." Valdren's voice was barely human. "Before I make you leave. I'm here to talk. About last night. About the barricade. About why we didn't pursue you." General Webb's gaze flicked to Zara. "And about who's trying to start a war." Zara sat up straighter in bed. "You know about the poison? We have our sources." The general pulled up a chair, moving slowly and deliberately to appear non-threatening. His guards remained by the door. "There's a faction within the vampire community that wants to overthrow King Valdren. They've been making contact with certain elements in human government, offering information in exchange for support." Valdren's mind raced. What kind of support? Military action against vampire territories. They want us to destroy the Northern Dominion, to eliminate you and anyone loyal to you, so they can take power. The general leaned back in his chair. "They told us that a vampire king would be breaking quarantine protocols last night, that he would be dangerous and out of control. They wanted us to kill you at that barricade. But you didn't." Zara's voice was quiet. "No." The general's expression softened slightly. "Because we've been watching you, King Valdren. Both of you, actually. We know about the journalist who stumbled into the vampire realm. We know you let her live when you should have killed her. We know you've been working to maintain peace, to keep vampire attacks on humans to a minimum, to enforce laws that protect both species. You've been spying on us." Valdren's tone was dangerous. "Yes, it's our job." The general didn't apologize. "But our surveillance taught us something important. You're not the monster your enemies want us to believe you are. And when you crashed through that barricade last night, when my men saw a vampire king cradling a dying woman like she was the most precious thing in the world, when you risked sunlight and exposure and everything to save her life that told us all we needed to know. You let us through because you realized we weren't a threat. We let you through because we realized you were being played, and so were we." The general pulled out a folder and set it on the bed beside Zara. "These are the names of the vampires working against you. Most are in your own court. Some are in other dominions. They're planning a coup, and they're planning to use human military forces as their weapon." Valdren took the folder, flipping through it with growing fury. Names he recognized, vampires he had trusted, people who had smiled to his face while plotting his destruction. And there, near the end of the list, was the name of his own advisor, Matthias Corvus. "Matthias," he said softly, and the name was a death sentence. "He's the one who poisoned Ms. Donovan," General Webb confirmed. "We have footage of him entering her chambers. We couldn't intervene without revealing our surveillance, and we weren't sure who to trust. But we made sure the hospital was alerted that you were coming, made sure they had the right antidotes on hand." Zara looked at the general with new understanding. "That's why the treatment worked so fast. You told them what poison to look for." "We did what we could without compromising our position." The general stood. "Now it's your turn, King Valdren. Deal with your traitors, clean your house. Because if you don't, if this faction succeeds in starting a war, a lot of innocent people on both sides will die." "Consider it done." Valdren's voice was ice and iron. "But understand this, General. I appreciate your assistance tonight. I am in your debt, and I pay my debts. However, if I ever discover your people spying on me or mine again, if you ever threaten what I hold dear, I will not be so gracious." "Fair enough." The general moved toward the door, his guards falling into step behind him. He paused at the threshold. "One more thing. There are forces in the human government who want war with vampires regardless of evidence or reason. I'm not one of them. But I can't hold them off forever. Whatever peace you're trying to build between our species, you're running out of time." Then he was gone. leaving Valdren and Zara alone in the quiet hospital room. Zara was the first to speak. Matthias tried to kill me. Yes. Valdren set the folder aside and took her hands in his. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I brought you into my world, put you in danger. Stop. She squeezed his hands. I chose this. I chose you. And I'd choose you again. Poison and military barricades and all of it. You almost died. But I didn't. You saved me. She pulled him down to sit beside her on the bed. What are you going to do about Matthias and the others? What I should have done months ago. His expression was grim. Vampire politics are brutal, Zara. Those who plot against the king don't get trials or second chances. They get examples made of them. You're going to kill them. Yes. He searched her face, looking for judgment or fear. Does that horrify you? She was quiet for a long moment, considering. Ask me a week ago, and I would have said yes. But someone just tried to murder me to score political points. They were willing to poison an innocent person to manipulate you. So no, I'm not horrified. I'm angry. Her eyes flashed. I want you to stop them. Whatever it takes. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the warmth of her mouth and the steady beat of her heart. She was alive. She was his. And anyone who threatened that would learn why he had ruled the Northern Dominion unchallenged for 3 centuries. I need to return to Castel Noctis, he said when they parted. This needs to be handled quickly before the traitors realize we know their plans. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. You're staying here where it's safe. Zara laughed, though there was no humor in it. Valdren, I was poisoned in your castle, in what was supposed to be the safest place in the vampire realm. Nowhere is safe, and I'll be damned if I'm going to hide in a hospital while you walk into a nest of traitors alone. I won't be alone. I have loyal guards, vampires I trust. How do you know who to trust now? She gestured to the folder. That list has 30 names on it. 30 vampires working against you. How many more aren't on the list? How many are hiding their involvement? She was right, and he hated it. He wanted her locked away somewhere secure, somewhere he could protect her absolutely. But such a place didn't exist. And more than that, she wasn't the type of person who would accept being protected from a distance. She was brave and stubborn and entirely too willing to throw herself into danger. It was infuriating. It was one of the things he loved most about her. If you come, he said slowly, you follow my orders exactly. No arguments, no improvisation, no heroics. I'll follow your reasonable orders. She smiled at his expression. That's the best you're getting. You will be the death of me. Nope, I'm going to be the life of you. Big difference. He wanted to argue more, to lock her in this hospital room and deal with the traitors himself, but he knew that expression on her face, the set of her jaw that said she would follow him whether he agreed or not. At least if she was with him, he could keep her in sight. We leave in 1 hour, he conceded. I need to make arrangements. Those arrangements included calling his most trusted guards, vampires who had been with him since before the Northern Dominion was established, whose loyalty had been proven through blood and time. He also called in favors from other vampire kings, allies who would serve as witnesses to what was about to happen. Executing traitors was his right as king, but doing it publicly, with proper witnesses, would send a stronger message. Zara was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and follow up with her regular doctor. The human medical staff seemed relieved to see them go, though the same nurse who had helped Valdren find the supply closet gave Zara a small smile and a nod. The drive back to Castel Noctis was tense and silent. Valdren kept one hand on Zara's knee, needing the physical contact to reassure himself she was real and alive. She covered his hand with hers, understanding without words what he needed. When they descended into the underground realm of the vampire court, everything appeared normal. Ancient stone corridors lit by elegant fixtures, vampire nobility moving through the halls in their finery, servants going about their duties. But Valdren could sense the undercurrent of tension, the whispers that stopped when he passed, the eyes that tracked his movement. They knew something had happened. They just didn't know what yet. He took Zara directly to his private chambers, which were warded with protections that only he could pass through. Once inside, he checked every corner, every shadow, every possible hiding place. Only when he was satisfied they were truly alone did he allow himself to relax slightly. This is really your bedroom." Zara looked around with open curiosity. She had never been in his personal quarters before. They were vast and luxurious, decorated in dark woods and deep colors, with a four-poster bed that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. Books lined the walls, some so old they were falling apart. Art hung in careful arrangement, paintings from across centuries. "You were expecting a coffin?" He almost smiled. "Maybe a little." She walked to one of the bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. "These are incredible. First editions, some of them. I've had a long time to collect." He watched her explore, committing the image to memory. Zara in his space, touching his things, making herself at home in the heart of his world. It felt right in a way he couldn't articulate. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Valdren opened it to find Cassian, his head of security, standing in the hallway. Cassian was ancient even by vampire standards, with the white hair and red eyes of their kind, but also a network of scars that spoke to countless battles survived. "The witnesses have arrived, my lord," Cassian said, "and the accused have been detained." "All 30? "All 33, actually. We found 3 more conspirators once we started investigating." Valdren's expression darkened. "Matthias, in the throne room as you requested." "Good." He turned to Zara. "Stay here. This won't take long." "Not a chance." She was already moving toward the door. "I have a right to face the person who tried to kill me." "Zara." "No arguments, remember?" She met his eyes, and he saw the steel in her gaze. "I'm coming." Cassian's eyebrows rose slightly, but he was too well trained to comment. Valdren sighed, knowing when he was beaten. "Fine. But you stay behind me at all times." The throne room of Castel Noctis was a cathedral of stone and shadow, with vaulted ceilings that disappeared into darkness and columns carved with the history of vampire kind. Valdren's throne sat on a raised dais at the far end, carved from a single piece of black marble. Tonight, it was surrounded by witnesses, vampire kings and queens from other dominions, all dressed in their formal finery, all watching with the ancient eyes of immortals who had seen this drama play out countless times before. The accused knelt in the center of the room, bound with silver chains that burned against their skin. 33 vampires, some young, some old, all wearing expressions ranging from defiance to terror. And at the front of the group, meeting Valdren's gaze with something close to hatred, was Matthias Corvus. Matthias had been Valdren's advisor for nearly a century. He was brilliant and strategic, with a mind for politics that had helped stabilize the Northern Dominion through multiple crises. Valdren had trusted him, valued his counsel, considered him a friend. All of it had been a lie. Valdren walked slowly down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Zara stayed close behind him, her presence a warm spot of humanity in a room full of immortal coldness. When he reached the dais, he turned to face the accused. "Matthias Corvus," his voice carried through the throne room, formal and final. "You stand accused of treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder. How do you answer?" Matthias lifted his chin, defiant even in chains. "I answer that you are a fool, Valdren, a weak, sentimental fool who has forgotten what it means to be a vampire king." "Explain." "You keep a human pet." Matthias's eyes flicked to Zara with open contempt. "You let her into our world, share our secrets with her, treat her like an equal when she's nothing but food. You enforce laws that protect humans, limit our feeding, force us to hide in the shadows like we're the ones who should be ashamed. You've made us weak." "I've made us civilized." Valdren's tone was ice. "There's a difference. Civilization is a human concept. We are predators. We should be ruling them, not cowering underground and pretending we're not what we are." Matthias struggled against his chains. "I tried to remove the human. I thought that would wake you up, remind you of your true nature. But you chose her over your own kind. You risked everything to save her mortal life." "Of course I did. I love her." The throne room went utterly silent. Those 3 words, "I love her," spoken openly by a vampire king about a human, were more shocking than any accusation of treason. Valdren felt the weight of immortal eyes on him, the judgment and surprise, and in some cases, disgust. He didn't care. "You love a human." Matthias started to laugh, a bitter, broken sound. "You actually love her? Then you're even more far gone than I thought." She'll be dead in a blink of an eye, Valdren. 50 years, maybe 60 if she's lucky. And you'll spend the rest of eternity alone, mourning something that was always going to end. That is my choice to make. Valdren descended from the dais, standing directly in front of Matthias. You tried to kill her. You plotted with human military forces to destroy the Dominion. You betrayed everything you swore to uphold. And for what? Power? Pride? For the future of our kind. Matthias met his eyes without flinching. Vampires are meant to be rulers, not refugees hiding in tunnels. But you'll never understand that, because you stopped being a true vampire the moment you fell for that human girl. Valdren struck faster than mortal eyes could follow, his hand wrapping around Matthias's throat and lifting him off the ground despite the silver chains. You're right that I've changed. I am not the cold, detached king I was before Zara. I am something more dangerous now. I am a vampire who has found something worth protecting, something worth killing for. He squeezed and Matthias choked, clawing uselessly at Valdren's iron grip. By the laws of the Northern Dominion, by the witness of the assembled kings and queens, I find you guilty of treason and murder. Your sentence is death. Valdren's eyes burned crimson, and I will carry it out personally. Matthias managed one last whispered word. Fool. Then Valdren tore his throat out. It was brutal and quick and utterly final. Matthias's body crumbled to ash, the way all vampires did in true death, and the silver chains clattered to the floor empty. Valdren stood in the settling dust, blood on his hands, and turned to face the remaining 32 conspirators. Does anyone else wish to question my rule? His voice was soft and deadly. Does anyone else think my love for a human makes me weak? Silence. Even the defiant ones had gone pale, understanding finally that they had miscalculated catastrophically. I didn't think so. Valdren wiped the blood from his hands with a cloth that Cassian offered. The rest of you will be judged individually. Those who merely followed Matthias's lead, who were coerced or misled, may find mercy. Those who actively work to harm my people or my... He paused, glancing at Zara. My beloved will face the same fate as Matthias. Choose your confessions wisely. The next several hours were a grim process of interrogations and executions. Some of the conspirators were spared, exiled from the Northern Dominion with marks that would warn other vampires of their treachery. Others were not so lucky. By the time the throne room emptied, 13 vampires had been reduced to ash, and the remaining 20 were being transported to the borders of the territory with stern warnings never to return. Zara had watched it all from a seat near the throne, her expression carefully neutral. She didn't flinch from the violence, didn't look away from the executions. She understood that this was the reality of the world Valdren inhabited, the brutal justice that kept vampire society functioning. When the last of the witnesses had departed, and they were finally alone again, Valdren sank onto the steps of the dais, suddenly exhausted. The night had drained him in ways that had nothing to do with physical exertion. He had killed people he once trusted, destroyed relationships built over decades, proven himself exactly the kind of ruthless monarch he had been trying not to be. Zara came to sit beside him, not speaking, just resting her head on his shoulder in silent support. I'm a monster, he said quietly. You're a king. She took his hand, still stained with blood despite the cloth. You did what you had to do to protect your people. I enjoyed it. The admission tasted like ash. When I killed Matthias, when I saw the light fade from his eyes, part of me was glad. Part of me wanted them all to burn. Of course you did. He tried to kill me. He betrayed you. Zara lifted her head to look at him. Being angry about that, wanting revenge, that doesn't make you a monster. It makes you someone who cares deeply and feels things intensely. It makes you real. I've spent 3 centuries trying not to feel things intensely. It's safer that way. Cleaner. Maybe. She shifted to face him fully. But is it better? Is it living? He looked at her, this mortal woman with her golden eyes and her impossible courage, and felt something loosen in his chest. She was right. Before Zara, he had been going through the motions of existence, ruling because that was what he did, feeding because that was what he needed, but never truly living. He had been a ghost in his own life. She made him feel alive again, dangerously, terrifyingly alive. I meant what I said earlier, he told her. I love you, and I know what Matthias said is true. You'll age and die while I remain unchanged. I know that every year I have with you brings me closer to losing you. I know that loving you is the most foolish thing I've ever done." "Wow, you really know how to sweet-talk a girl." He smiled despite himself. "I'm not finished. I know all of that, and I don't care. I would rather have 50 years of real life with you than an eternity of hollow existence without you. You make me better, Zara. You make me want to be better." She kissed him, soft and sweet, and when she pulled back there were tears in her eyes. "I love you too. And I know what I'm signing up for: the danger, the politics, the fact that your world is full of people who think humans are food. I know all of it, and I'm choosing you anyway. We're both idiots then. The best kind of idiots." She stood, pulling him up with her. "Now come on, you've had a long night of executing traitors and making dramatic declarations of love. You need rest." "Vampires don't really need rest." "Fine. Then I need rest. And I want you with me." They returned to his chambers, and this time when Zara looked around, it was with the eyes of someone who belonged there. She shed her blood-stained clothes borrowed from the castle stores, since her own had been ruined, and slipped into one of Valdren's shirts. It hung on her like a dress, and he found the sight unreasonably appealing. They lay together in his massive bed, and for a while they just held each other, processing everything that had happened. Zara traced patterns on his chest, her touch feather light, and Valdren threaded his fingers through her dark curls. "What happens now?" she asked. "Matthias said there are forces in the human government that want war. The general said you're running out of time to build peace." "I know." It was a problem that had been weighing on him even before the poison, before the barricade. Vampire and human relations have always been tenuous. We exist in the shadows, they exist in the light. Neither side fully trusts the other. But it doesn't have to be that way. Zara propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "You've proven that vampires and humans can coexist. You've been enforcing laws that protect both species. That's a start. A start that almost got you killed. Details." She waved a hand dismissively. "The point is, we need to go bigger. Instead of hiding in tunnels and pretending vampires don't exist, what if we came out publicly? What if we showed the human world that vampires aren't monsters?" Valdren stared at her like she'd suggested he walk into sunlight. "That's insane." "Is it? Think about it. Right now, humans fear vampires because we're mysterious and unknown. We're the things that go bump in the night, the predators in the dark. But what if they saw us as people? Immortal people with different needs, sure, but still people capable of reason and emotion and love. Zara, there are humans who can barely tolerate other humans who look different from them. Do you truly think they'll welcome vampires with open arms?" "No," she admitted, "but I think they'll have a harder time justifying genocide if we're not faceless monsters. I think seeing a vampire king who risked everything to save his human girlfriend might make them pause. I think showing them our art, our culture, our history might build bridges instead of walls." It was a beautiful, naive, utterly impossible idea. It was also exactly the kind of idea that might work. "You want me to reveal the existence of vampires to the world," he said slowly. "You want me to come out of the shadows and hope that humans react with understanding instead of pitchforks and fire. I want you to give them a chance to be better than their fears." She cupped his face in her hands. "And I want to help you do it. I'm a journalist, remember? I know how to tell stories, how to shape narratives, how to make people care about things they thought they didn't care about. Let me tell our story, Valdren. Let me show the world what I see when I look at you." He wanted to say no. Every instinct, every lesson learned over 3 centuries of existence screamed that this was dangerous and foolish and would end in disaster. Vampires survived by staying hidden. That was the first rule, the most important rule. But the old rules had also led to conspiracies and poison and military barricades. The old rules had nearly gotten Zara killed. Maybe it was time for new rules. "If we do this," he said carefully, "it has to be done right. We'll need support from other vampire dominions, agreements on how to handle exposure, protocols for dealing with human reactions. We'll need allies in human government, people like General Webb who are willing to work toward peace instead of war. Zara's face lit up with excitement. So, you're considering it. I'm considering not immediately dismissing it, which for someone my age is practically the same thing. He pulled her back down against his chest. This will take time to plan. Months, possibly years, and there's no guarantee it will work. Nothing worth doing comes with guarantees. She pressed a kiss over his heart. But at least we'll try. Together. Together, he agreed, and the word felt like a promise. They fell asleep like that, tangled together in the darkness of his chambers, and for the first time in living memory, Valdren dreamed. He dreamed of a world where vampires walked openly in the streets, where humans and immortals worked side by side, where love between species wasn't a scandal but a celebration. It was a beautiful dream, fragile as glass and probably just as likely to shatter. But it was a dream worth pursuing. The next several months were a whirlwind of activity. Valdren called a summit of all the vampire dominions, bringing together kings and queens from around the world to discuss Zara's proposal. It was contentious and heated, with many arguing that exposure would lead to extinction. But there were also voices of support, vampires who were tired of hiding, who saw the wisdom in building bridges before the walls became weapons. In the end, they agreed to a pilot program. The Northern Dominion would be the test case, slowly revealing themselves to select human authorities and communities, monitoring reactions, adjusting as needed. If it worked, other dominions would follow. If it failed, they would retreat back into shadow and pretend it never happened. Zara worked tirelessly, writing articles, giving interviews, crafting a narrative that presented vampires as a hidden civilization rather than a supernatural threat. She told their story, the journalist and the king, the human and the vampire, two people from different worlds who found love in the most unlikely place. It was romantic and compelling and utterly true, which made it all the more powerful. General Webb proved to be an invaluable ally, helping to navigate the complex politics of human government and military. He arranged meetings with key officials, provided security for the first public appearances, and used his influence to counter the more aggressive factions who wanted to treat vampires as enemies rather than potential partners. There were setbacks, of course. Protests erupted in some cities, religious groups condemned vampires as demons, and there were several violent incidents where humans attacked vampires, or vice versa. But there were also moments of genuine connection, a vampire doctor who saved a human child's life, a human teacher who welcomed vampire students into her classroom, a mixed community that formed in downtown Ashwick where both species lived side by side. Through it all, Valdren and Zara remained at the center of it, the living embodiment of what cooperation between their worlds could look like. They appeared together at press conferences, attended cultural events, hosted diplomatic dinners where vampire nobility mixed with human politicians. It was exhausting and exhilarating and frequently terrifying, but it was working. 12 months after the night Valdren drove through the military barricade, they stood together in the renovated Great Hall of Castel Noctis, which had been opened to the public for the first time in its long history. Humans and vampires mingled freely, admiring the architecture, the art, the carefully curated exhibits that told the story of vampire civilization through the ages. "Penny for your thoughts?" Zara slipped her hand into Valdren's, smiling up at him. "I'm thinking about how far we've come." He gestured to the crowded hall. "A year ago, I would have said this was impossible. Now look at it." "It's not perfect," she cautioned. "There's still a long way to go." "I know, but it's progress. Real, tangible progress." He pulled her closer, not caring who saw or what they thought. "And it's all because of you." "Us?" she corrected. "We did this together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her in front of gods and humans and anyone else who cared to watch. The crowd around them erupted in applause, and Zara laughed against his mouth, joy bubbling up irrepressibly. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like idiots, Valdren realized something profound. He was happy. Genuinely, deeply, impossibly happy in a way he hadn't been since his mortal life ended over 3 centuries ago. Zara had given him that gift, had pulled him out of the cold detachment of immortality and made him feel human again. It was the greatest magic he'd ever witnessed. Later that night, after the last visitors had left and the great hall was quiet again, Valdren led Zara to a private balcony that overlooked the underground city of the vampire realm. Thousands of lights twinkled below them, vampire families going about their evening routines, children playing in the streets, couples walking hand in hand. "I have something for you," Valdren said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Zara's eyes went wide. "Valdren, let me say this." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple and elegant, with a single diamond that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. "I know we've only been together for a year. I know that by human standards that's too soon. But Zara, I've lived for over 3 centuries, and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are my heart, my light, my reason for existing, and I want to spend whatever time we have, whether it's 50 years or 500, making you happy." He dropped to one knee, and Zara's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. "Zara Donovan, will you marry me?" She didn't even hesitate. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, catching her as she launched herself into his arms. They kissed again, softer this time, full of promise and future and all the beautiful possibilities that lay ahead. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, "my vampire king." "I love you," he replied, "my impossible, infuriating, absolutely perfect human." They stood on that balcony for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the city below them live and breathe and change. The world was different now than it had been a year ago. The walls between species were coming down, slowly but surely. There would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome, more people who would try to tear them apart. But they had faced poison and military barricades and political conspiracies. They had survived attempts on their lives and challenges to their love. They had stared down fear and hatred and come out the other side stronger. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that made international headlines. It was held at sunset in the gardens of Castel Noctis, with both vampire and human guests in attendance. Valdren wore traditional vampire formal wear, all black with silver embroidery that caught the fading light. Zara wore a dress that seemed to be made of starlight, flowing and ethereal and absolutely breathtaking. General Webb gave her away, having formed an unlikely friendship with Zara over their months of working together. The ceremony was officiated by a vampire elder and a human minister, a symbol of the unity they were trying to build. And when Valdren lifted Zara's veil and kissed her as his wife, as his queen, the applause was deafening. The reception lasted until dawn, a joyous celebration of love and hope and new beginnings. Humans and vampires danced together, shared food and wine and blood provided by willing donors, told stories and jokes, and found common ground in the simple act of celebration. Valdren watched it all with something close to wonder. This was his life now. This was his future. A human queen at his side, 2 worlds learning to coexist, and the possibility of peace stretching out before him like an open road. "What are you thinking?" Zara appeared at his elbow, sneaking away from the crowd of well-wishers to steal a moment alone with him. "I'm thinking about that night a year and a half ago when you were dying and I drove through a military barricade to save you. I'm thinking about how that one moment changed everything." "They didn't chase us," Zara said, remembering, "because they saw you weren't the monster they expected. Because they saw me with you." He pulled her into his arms, swaying to the distant music. "You've made me better, Zara. You've made the whole world better. We've made each other better." She rested her head on his chest, listening to the heartbeat that had started again the night he fell in love with her. Vampires' hearts didn't beat, but Valdren's did now, faintly, an echo of the mortality she brought back to him. And we're going to keep making it better. One day, one choice, one act of love at a time. They danced until the sun threatened the horizon, until Valdren had to retreat to the safety of the underground chambers. Zara went with him, hand in hand, leaving the celebration behind to start their own private one. Years passed. The integration of vampire and human societies continued, not without difficulty, but with steady progress. Zara became a respected advocate for supernatural rights, writing books and giving lectures, using her platform to educate and inspire. Valdren led the vampire dominions with wisdom and strength, balancing tradition with innovation, honoring the past while building the future. They faced opposition, of course. There were always those who feared change, who clung to old hatreds and prejudices. But they also found allies in unexpected places, built friendships across species lines, and slowly, carefully, began to transform the world into something new. And through it all, they loved each other with the kind of fierce, unshakable devotion that became legendary. Stories were told about the Vampire King, who drove through a military barricade to save his human love, who risked sunlight and death and everything he was for the chance to keep her alive. Songs were written about the journalist who looked at a monster and saw a man worth saving. Their love became a symbol of what was possible when people chose connection over fear, when they reached across divides and found common humanity even in the most unlikely places. On their 10th anniversary, Zara woke in their shared chambers to find Valdren watching her with that same intense expression he'd worn the night they met. "What?" she smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "I'm just thinking about how grateful I am." He caught her hand and kissed her palm. 10 years ago, you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. You made me question everything I thought I knew about myself and my world. You challenged me and infuriated me and made me feel things I'd forgotten I was capable of feeling. Are you complaining? Never. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest. I'm saying thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. You don't have to thank me for loving you, Valdren. It's the easiest thing I've ever done. They lay together as morning light filtered through the curtains, safe in their underground sanctuary, and talked about nothing and everything. They discussed plans for the upcoming summit, laughed about the latest political scandal involving a vampire senator and a human journalist, made plans for a trip to the coast where Valdren had a house he wanted to show her. It was ordinary and domestic and perfectly mundane, which made it extraordinary. A vampire king and his human queen, married for a decade, still finding new ways to love each other, still building their impossible dream one day at a time. And if sometimes Valdren thought about the inevitable end, about the day when Zara's mortal life would run its course and leave him behind, he didn't dwell on it. Instead, he focused on the present, on the warm woman in his arms, on the life they were living together. There were solutions being researched, ways to extend human life, to bridge the gap between mortal and immortal. Vampire scientists worked alongside human researchers, exploring possibilities that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Maybe they would find an answer. Maybe Zara would choose to become like him, to embrace immortality. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she would live her natural span and leave him with memories and grief and the knowledge that he had been lucky enough to love her at all. Either way, they had now. They had today. They had each other. And really, what more could anyone ask for? 20 years after the night Valdren drove through the military barricade, they stood together at a ceremony celebrating the official treaty between the vampire dominions and the Human World Council. It had taken 2 decades of negotiation, compromise, setbacks, and breakthroughs, but finally, after years of work, there was peace. Real, lasting, legally binding peace. Valdren signed the treaty with a flourish, his white hair now worn longer, his face still as ageless and beautiful as it had been centuries ago. Zara stood beside him, older now but no less vibrant, her dark hair threaded with silver, her honey eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. They had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had built a bridge between their worlds and made it strong enough to last. The celebration that followed was enormous, a global event broadcasted to millions. Humans and vampires gathered in cities around the world, marking the moment when fear finally gave way to hope, when 2 species chose cooperation over conflict. And in Ashwick, in the place where it all began, there was a special memorial unveiled, a statue of a man and a woman immortalized in bronze, standing together with their hands clasped. The plaque beneath read, "In honor of Valdren Corvo and Zara Donovan, whose love proved that even the deepest divides can be crossed with courage and faith. When Zara saw it, she cried. When Valdren saw it, he held her and whispered promises against her hair, vows to love her for as long as time allowed, to make every day count, to never take a single moment for granted. They had started with a desperate drive through a military barricade, with poison and fear and the very real possibility of death. They had built a love story that changed the world, that proved the impossible was possible, that showed what could be accomplished when people chose love over hate. And as they stood together beneath the statue, surrounded by friends and allies and the world they had helped create, Zara looked up at her vampire king and smiled. Not bad for a journalist who stumbled into the wrong tunnel. Not bad for a vampire who forgot how to live until you reminded him. Valdren kissed her, soft and sweet, and full of all the love he would carry for her until the stars went dark. "Thank you, Zara, for everything." "Thank you," she replied, "for driving through that barricade, for choosing me, for being brave enough to love me even when it was dangerous and impossible and completely insane. I would do it again." He said it with utter certainty. "Every time, every life, every possible world, I would choose you." And he meant it. They lived the rest of Zara's natural life in joy and love, surrounded by the world they built together. When she was old and her body finally began to fail, Valdren offered her the choice he had always promised to give: mortality or immortality, human death or vampire transformation. She chose to stay mortal, not because she didn't love him, but because she wanted to live a fully human life, to experience all of it, the aging, the changing, the natural cycle of existence. And Valdren, who loved her more than life itself, honored that choice even though it broke his ancient heart. When Zara Donovan died at the age of 73, surrounded by friends and family and the husband who had loved her for over 5 decades, the world mourned. Flags flew at half-mast in both human and vampire territories. Tributes poured in from around the globe, and Valdren, who had survived wars and plagues in centuries of existence, who had never shed a tear in 300 years of immortal life, wept openly. But he didn't retreat into darkness. He didn't let grief consume him, because Zara wouldn't have wanted that. She would have wanted him to keep building, keep growing, keep working toward the dream they shared. So he did. He established the Zara Donovan Foundation, dedicated to fostering cooperation between species and supporting young people who wanted to make the world better. He wrote a memoir about their life together, a love letter to the woman who had changed everything. He continued to rule the Northern Dominion with wisdom and compassion, always asking himself what Zara would have done, what she would have said. And every year, on the anniversary of the night he drove through the military barricade, Valdren visited the hospital where he had saved her life. He sat in the parking lot where he had broken every rule to get her to safety. And he remembered. He remembered her smile, her courage, her impossible belief that love could change the world. He remembered dancing with her at their wedding, holding her through 1,000 nights, watching her face light up when she achieved something she'd been working toward. He remembered everything, holding each memory like a precious jewel, polishing it with care so it would never fade. And he was grateful. Despite the pain of her loss, despite the empty centuries that stretched before him, he was grateful he had known her at all, grateful he had loved her, grateful she had loved him back. Because Zara Donovan had given him the greatest gift anyone could give, she had made him feel alive. She had taken a cold, detached vampire king and reminded him what it meant to be human. She had shown him that love was worth any risk, any sacrifice, any cost. And that was a lesson he would carry with him forever. The world they built together continued to grow and thrive long after Zara was gone. Vampires and humans lived side by side, not without challenges, but with mutual respect and growing understanding. New generations grew up knowing both species, seeing them not as monsters and prey, but as neighbors and friends. And always, at the heart of it all, was the story of the vampire king who drove through a military barricade to save the woman he loved. The story of 2 people from different worlds who chose each other against all odds and changed history in the process. It was a love story for the ages, and it was absolutely, completely, perfectly true.